Hi everyone, welcome to Here We Are, Brattleboro's community talk show. I'm Wendy O'Connell, and we are delighted today to have on our show Julie Moir Messervy. Julie is an awesome and innovative leader in landscape and garden design theory and practice. Her full-service design firm, JMMDS, works with homeowners and organizations in both private and public spaces. She's the author of many books, she lectures widely, and she's the founder and CEO of Home Outside, which uses cutting-edge technology to bring great landscape design to everyone. That includes you. And Julie is also the 2024 recipient of the Vermont Women-Owned Business of the Year Award, and that was just last year. So congratulations, Julie.
Thank you, Wendy.
And thanks for being here.
It's lovely to be on this show. Thank you for asking.
Julie, you know, I think that in talking to you a few days ago and reading through a lot of things about you, you have a really interesting approach to garden design. I think it is very different from most approaches, also including who we are in the design. Instead of just going somewhere and choosing this and choosing that, you really take the person into account.
I like to get to the heart of the onion when I talk to people and they become my clients. I like to learn, well, let's put it this way. Form doesn't follow function the way that Buckminster Fuller said, for me. Form follows feeling. So feeling is the most important thing, and your feelings, Wendy, about your garden and what they are really important to me if I'm your designer.
Yes.
Okay, so I need to get to the very core of what your feelings are, what your, sounds kind of hokey, but to say what your longings are, and then find a way to fulfill them as an outward garden on your land.
Yes. You have relationships with gardens, obviously.
Yes.
And I would imagine having clients, when you're talking to them, it takes longer probably for you to find out what's going on.
Well, in some ways it's shorter because you get right to the heart of the matter, which is why are they building a garden?
Yeah.
It used to be when I apprenticed in Japan, as I told you, when I was in my 20s, working for a garden master, and I learned Japanese garden design and the secrets of Japanese garden design in Kyoto back in those days. And that became very important to me, is to understand the depth of possibility of gardens, especially in that part of the world. And really what's so beautiful about Japanese gardens is they're a distillation of nature. So we all start from a kind of a love of nature, if we can be there in a natural setting. And it speaks to us in important ways. So my idea was that if we're building a garden for somebody, we need to understand who they are in nature, who they are in their sort of heart of hearts, in a way. And my big question is always for everyone is, where did you go when you were a child for daydreaming, for reverie, and reflection?
Yes.
So let me ask you, where did you go, Wendy, when you were a child?
You know, this was the 50s. I was an only child, so I spent a lot of time outside.
Yes.
And I would go out with my cat, maybe, you know, or I would go out by myself, discovering just the things that I couldn't even name, but wanting to be out there. My mother had a beautiful garden and designed it in a way that you could sort of walk out onto these islands of grass, so you could be in the middle of the garden, you know, when you were, instead of just viewing it. So I think that I spent a lot of time, you know, outside in general, just playing. And so that's where I would go.
So the islands were where you would sort of gravitate to?
Yeah, that my memory of them is so strong.
Yes.
You know.
Well, they're a very strong archetypal space in your life. And then if I were designing your garden today, I might think about incorporating them.
Yes.
Or incorporating something that comes out of the edge of your garden so that it feels like a promontory, so that it starts to become an island in your life.
That's so cool, because we're walking right into the archetypes, you know, that you talk about.
Yeah.
And I can feel, you know, what you're saying. It's like, oh, that would be and I hadn't thought of that in years, but that would be a place that I would want to go. And
you'd
I would
automatically find it as your spot.
Right.
That's right.
So it's a promontory, which is one of the archetypes?
Yes. There's 7 archetypes. Only 7 fundamental forms of space this is something that I came up with from being a landscape designer, working in Japan for some time. but also having children myself, being a mother, and watching my children play in space and occupy space, if you will, and being a landscape myself. That as a mother, I was the first landscape of my children's life. They were inside of a dark protective form, that was me, and then eventually they came out, and I swaddled them close. We swaddled them and held them in a kind of, they came out from what I call the sea into the cave where we were held close, and their eyes were just beginning to look out at the world. And then I held them as a harbor in the world. I harbored them so that they grew well and could look out at the world from a safe place. And those are all very important parts of gardens. Architecture and plant cities as well as nature. Then they get off the lap of me as the parent, and they creep out onto the ground, starting to get ready to walk, and then they toddle out into the edge of the world, and I call that promontory. So they're exploring away from the body of the parent and looking back to make sure you're still there. And then at a certain point they become islands, usually when they're adolescents, and they can sort of have a little more aloneness and independence from their parent. And they're a little island, they start to become a bigger island, and little by little they become adults and become a mountain. And they start to sort of make the journey up the mountain to the very top, where I am becoming a little more and more at the top of the mountain as I get older, and have more wisdom, have more experience, and I look down on the world and there it is, far below. I've been there and I've done it before. And then eventually, when I'm ready, I'll become part of the sky. And in my view, I probably start back over again in the sea in a new form. So that's my archetypal theory. And it helps me as a garden designer tremendously, because I can really just jump right to what's important to people. And many people want all of those in their space. Japanese gardens are composed of every one of those. In every aspect of the archetypes are in a Japanese garden. And the way that you get between archetypes, if you think about it, is you take a journey to get from one place to the other. And that journey, as a designer, is a very fun thing to choreograph.
Very much so.
And anyone themselves can do this as well.
That's right. Well, you know, to give that surround and that structure to something like a garden and have it reflect back and forth between your life and the garden is really helpful.
I think it is.
Helpful is kind of a bland word to use. It's very exciting, you know, to realize that every place you are inhabiting you can inhabit fully.
Yeah, that's right. And you can also inhabit it in your mind as well as in your physical body, so that you can imagine being in that place and it brings you comfort, might bring you joy. And, you know, the only issue for us is the traumatic side of this, which can happen if you're enclosed in a cave too long. You can, of course, get very anxious. I only deal with the joyful side when I'm dealing with gardens, so it's a great thing.
The objectification, too, I think, is an interesting point. The fact that you are making a garden that's outside of yourself, you know, but has all the components of your life.
That's right, it can.
And feelings.
And really, the other part for me that's important is that it's your garden. It's your inward garden that I might be designing. It's not mine. I can make mine a million times in the earth and everyone would see sort of the same thing. But when you start adding in some depth from your client, you become a better designer for others. And you combine your inward garden with our inward gardens get combined together in a sense. And something that's never been seen before has been produced.
That's right.
Because you're unique and I'm unique.
Yes, and yet we connect.
That's right.
That's the thing.
That's right.
And that's how gardens do connect people.
Yes.
You know, without knowing any of that around it at all. You know, you can go into a garden and be moved, you know, in many different ways and have relationships in very different ways too.
Right. That's right.
It's very interesting, Julie.
Good, thanks.
Well, it's also so interesting to me because you were starting out, like your design principles, your formatory ones were Asian. Is that correct?
Originally, yes. Yes. Well, it was actually my childhood that was the most important formation of my life.
Let's hear about your childhood.
Well, I'm the opposite of you. I come from 7 children. I'm the second oldest. it was a wild scene in our house, and wonderful, and very fun, but exhausting. So I found that even as an extrovert, even as somebody who loved my family, I needed to get away. And nature was where I went. We were lucky to live in a half-acre site where right around us were some forests and some areas. There was an old apple orchard down the street somebody else owned, and a little pond here and there. So I could find places and make forts and bring my dolls, and it was, bring a friend. Yeah. And that became my contemplative place in the world. And when it was fast forward to when I was at graduate school in architecture, I opened up a book on Japanese gardens, and I said, oh my God, I've been here before. This is a more abstracted and more cleaned up version of what I experienced in scruffy nature at home when I was a little girl. Yeah. But I want to do this for people. This is what I want to learn how to build. So that's how I was able to go to Kyoto and work for my garden master.
That's really interesting. At a very young age, you were in your 20s.
24, yes.
Yeah.
I was lucky to find out so early what I loved.
Very.
Right, yeah.
I mean, that's a great fortune.
Yeah, and I've been doing it ever since.
And to recognize that, too, that this was something, that not only was formatory, but it was also part of who you were.
Yes.
It's pretty unusual.
It is.
To have that experience at that age.
And then what's so great about garden design and landscape is that the whole world is in it. There's a lot of ologies. You need to know you need to know your science a little bit at least, if not know where to go to learn about it. You need to know a lot about history. Every site has a different history, and you need, especially in Vermont, you need to understand it.
Yeah.
And then there's all these sort of theologies and philosophies and art historical issues, and everything is really interesting in my field. So it's endlessly fascinating.
In geology.
I love geology. Stones, I love stones so much. And setting stones is one of my favorite things to do.
And so do you do a little stone walling?
No, I don't. I do actual sort of Japanese kind of
interesting. Placement
of stones in space.
Yeah. I remember when Inward Garden came out, and I remember being so taken with that because, again, it was a new approach. I'm not a gardener, but it was your approach to it, and the fact of a garden being inward. You've got these two almost opposite things going on at the same time. When you came back to the States after that, how did you progress with that?
I didn't know very much, actually. I had worked for a year and a half in Japan. I had seen 80 gardens very close up in the Kyoto area and beyond. I came, and then I also worked in the gardens there as the lowest person on the totem pole, sort of pushing wheelbarrows around and serving tea, and I did tea ceremony as well, which was very important because it's really the art of placement.
Yes.
In front of, as you are right there with people and serving them tea ceremony. So a lot of different influences while I was there. Zen Buddhism, I sat Zazen in the mornings. But when I got home back here, I didn't know what I was doing. So I was very lucky to have my first job. I taught at night and about Japanese garden design and history, and then little by little about design as I became a designer. But I got my first job and found a great contractor to work with and built my first garden here, and then I just kept going whenever anyone would ask. And it's been that way ever since. I was a little unusual in what I knew, and I think that, I knew a lot, little by little, got to know people through the Arnold Arboretum and lots of places, through my teaching, through lecturing eventually, and then through writing books. All these things turn out to be useful marketing tools, but I never actually thought about them that way. I just wanted to let people know what I had learned and to pass on Professor Nakane's kindness to me and make sure that others learned it as well.
Julie, you've also done some fabulous collaborations over the years, in addition to everything else you've been doing, building businesses, which we'll get to, etc. You did a great collaboration with Yo-Yo Ma, the Toronto Music Garden, which was in '99, which is now a while ago. So with cellist Yo-Yo Ma. So can you talk about that? Incredible.
How lucky was I? I just happened to be working with his family at the time. I was living in Boston, where I lived most of my life at that time. And I was starting to work with them, and I had just published Contemplative Gardens, my first book. And he loved it. And he was in the middle of this project, which was to take the 6 cello suites by Bach and give each of them to an artist of some type. And the first 3 were done with dancers. Mark Morris, the famous contemporary dancer, a wonderful kabuki artist, and Torvald and Dean, the ice dancers at the time, who were in the Olympics. And each of them interpreted the suite with him, involved in some form or another, in film. And then he got to the next 3 and thought, well, what should I do with these? And I was working with him, and so he thought, maybe one of them should be a garden, a public garden, a contemplative garden. So we started in Boston, tried to make this work. He gave me suite number 1 and number 4 to listen to, and I listened to both, and number 1 was all about nature. I could totally take that piece, the very famous da 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 do 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 do. Everyone knows that suite. So I took that and turned it into a garden, so to speak, by listening really closely, by studying ancient dance manuals, by bringing it to everyone I worked with and saying, what did you hear here? What do you hear? Including my children, who gave me some of the best ideas of all. So little by little, we worked in Boston. It ended up that it was supposed to be next to City Hall Plaza in an impossible site to do in the time period we had. He had to produce these films by a certain time, and we couldn't build a garden in that time. So we ended up going to Toronto. And in Toronto, the first day I was there, the mayor said yes. The site was ready, a 3-acre site on Harborfront, perfect site with nothing on it, and it needed an idea. We had the idea. So, and then that night we needed money. So that night Yo-Yo was playing the Dvorak cello concerto, and somebody afterwards said, I'll raise the money for you. And there it was.
Amazing.
A year and a half where we couldn't make it work in Boston, but in one day we had all of it together. And then so by the end of the film, if you see the film, it's called Yo-Yo Ma, inspired by Bach, the Music Garden. It's the number 1 that they have.
I didn't know it was on film.
Yes, it's on film.
That's
very
exciting.
fun. It was on PBS 20 years ago. And working with Yo-Yo, you can't, as you would think, he's just the way he seems.
Yeah.
The most wonderful human being.
I believe that. I believe that. Julie, you also, you've collaborated with Sarah Sasanko with the Not So Big House Outside.
Yes.
Much as you have revolutionized gardening, I believe, I think she's done that for the Not So Big House.
Yes, it was a great concept.
Great concept.
Yeah.
And I have a builder friend who used those plans, Not So Big House plans. He said they were the easiest plans he ever worked with.
That's great.
So that was an amazing endorsement. And you've had wonderful clients, Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum.
Oh, we got to work there, yes. I got to rearrange plants at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Court, which I've worked at many places in Boston, the Arnold Arboretum, done several gardens, at Mount Auburn Cemetery, some of my favorite places in the world. We built a Japanese garden recently, and I don't usually do Japanese gardens anymore, but I was asked by a friend, an old friend, to do something in Edinburgh. And so working there was very fun.
Interesting.
But it's important for me to say that I do not do these alone. I am a collaborator.
Yes.
And I work with an incredible team.
One of the businesses that you've created.
Yeah, well, our JMMDS business, they found me in Saxton's River, and Jana Bryan, Bethany Gracia, who's since moved down to North Carolina, Jennifer Silver, wonderful people, and Erica Bowman out in Jamaica. So I've been very, very fortunate to have a consistent group of amazing women. We're all women firm. And then they all were able to transition to also helping me with my home outside tech idea.
Oh, great.
And they've been able to take on new roles as designers, yes, but also as people who have had to develop a tech product or make rules for AI that will be able to help place things into a a landscape.
Yes.
So it's very interesting work that we do.
And also they have been with you along the way. So
yes,
they have,
18 years or more.
You've developed together, and you've developed these ideas.
And everything I've done is because of them, and they work with me on all of it.
Mm-hmm. You were talking about the app that you've got out now that people can use at home.
Yes.
And they can do sort of do-it-yourself kind of thing. And this is augmented reality.
I had an idea. I wanted to democratize landscape design because so many times I end up working for people who can afford to work with us, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love them, and I'm really thrilled to do that. But I realized that with the technology out there that was coming in with AI, not the generative AI that everyone does right now. This is 3D, AI, and augmented reality. And we've been able to put together these really hard, interesting technologies to help a fuddy-duddy industry that was really not technologically savvy. We've just put our app out 3 months ago, and what you can do is try out collections of plants or individual plants in your yard, right there in full scale. You can move them around until they get them just right, and learn about them, and then we give you a planting plan for the collections that we've created. And my team continues to design with using planting design for people. And we've also created an AI digital twin of your yard so that we actually can see your yard and place plants into it for you. It's not in the app yet. We're going to bring that out later when it's fully ready.
You having fun with all this?
Oh, it's amazing.
Cool.
It's sort of like downloading your brain into a way that you never thought you could.
Interesting.
And also I'm not originally a planting designer the way that some of my team are. So I've learned so much about putting plants together. I knew a lot, but I didn't know as much as many. And so it's been so wonderful to be able to give. The hardest part of landscape design in some ways is putting plants together that work with each other and that are the right companions. And so being able to give that to everybody, either in a free form of the app, or if you can also subscribe and get a few more features that way. It's been fantastic.
That's so great. Well, it's
dream come true.
Well, I just love the fact that you are melding all these different kinds of things together. You know, your inward sensitivity, your awareness of other people, and the design, of course, the contemplative
little
piece.
by little, the whole thing is what we're trying to get to. And all the pain points that are there.
Technology.
Yeah. And really, little by little, I think if we can solve all the problems, in the end, what we really need to do, what's really exciting, is that plants, if we plant plants in the right way in our yards and make them resilient, it's something that homeowners can do to combat climate change.
That's right.
We can plant and make our rather than such a smooth landscape that's perfectly mown, we can make it nubbly, and we can make it sustainable, and we can make it resilient. We can help with flood tolerance and with fire tolerance if we design the right way, and it's certainly drought tolerance. So that's something that plants can do, and our app can show you how to do as we develop it.
So great.
So it's very, very important work.
Yeah.
It turns out.
Isn't it amazing, to realize that this thing that has been looming before us since when we were not kids, but when we were probably in our 20s, of climate change, and a growing awareness of that.
Yes.
And to realize that we really can tend our own gardens.
We can, and we feel so unable to do anything, but it turns out there's so much can do.
That's right.
And if we'd all do it,
or
it's
even
amazing.
half of us.
We can really help with biodiversity, carbon capture, all the other things that are out there to be helped with, and we can grow our own food.
You're born in the Midwest, and you moved to Connecticut.
Yes.
And then you spent time in Boston and
Lots
Japan.
of time, yeah.
How'd you end up in Vermont?
Good question. I married my husband, who was here and was never going to go and live in the suburbs of Boston, where I was at the time. My children were finishing high school at a good school outside of Boston. I had lived all over Boston and Cambridge for most of my life after college and graduate school, and loved it. But I met him, and he was here, and I thought, well, I've never lived in the country.
Oh.
And maybe I can bring my work with me. And so I came up here, and I had to wait till my children were graduated from high school, all of them, 3 of them.
Yeah.
And so finally we sort of would meet each other here and there and get together, but finally 6 years later I was able to move in. We bought a little house on a big piece of land in Westminster, which is so beautiful.
Yes.
I am so lucky to be here. And I've never looked back.
Wow.
It's been, what Vermont has done for me are many, many things, but among them is the ability to have a space to really dream.
Yes.
To really think about what's important, to work on the land, for sure. I mean, to have to also do that, to be connected to nature so clearly, the way we all are. And then to find my team.
Yes.
Our first office was in Saxton's River, which was just wonderful.
Yeah.
We were there for a long time. And little by little, everyone found me, and this great talent. We're here, these people, we're here, and we formed this sort of understanding of what we could do in the world. And I could because of them and being here.
Yes, and also I think it's interesting you saying you've never lived in a rural area before.
No, I hadn't. Been in the cities and suburbs. And
and you can't get much more rural than where you are. And
way up a hill.
You're way up the hill. And it is a beautiful space. It is, and beautiful gardens as well.
Well, they're cobbler's gardens, but that's okay. I'm not hard on myself about my own gardens. I have enough going on.
You have plenty going
on.
And
I'm what I call a mind gardener, not a dirt gardener. I have to become a dirt gardener here and there for my vegetable gardens, and weeding and stuff. But my natural tendency is to dream gardens.
Designing and dreaming.
Yeah, and then what I always, my first husband, John, would say, well, there's the dirt gardener and the mind gardener, but when you put them together, it's the dirty-minded gardener.
That's very good.
Isn't that good?
That's very good. Yes,
I like it.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's what we all should be.
Well, I think, too, one of the messages that sort of carries through the idea that, to use an overused word, empowering people to really trust who they are. And what they like and where they're comfortable, And I think for many of us who are not gardeners, who might not have a natural tendency for that, but we also buy flowers probably, or there are things that we like or colors we like. And so to be able to work with someone, in that kind of a way, shape, right, as well.
Well, and occupying spaces, which we do all the time. I mean, it doesn't have to be a garden. You go into a restaurant, and where do you feel most comfortable?
Yes.
For me, it's a booth in the bar or the booth in the edge. It's not the middle of the room, but some people really want to be in the middle of the room.
Right.
So, you go to a building, and where do you want to be there? You might want to take the elevator to the top floor to be in the highest place. Right. We're all a little different about this. And this, my archetypes are sort of a way to just have a language of landscapes that everyone can speak. And this language is a heart landscape. It's a heart language. It's not something that's left-brained. It really comes straight from your heart. And so I think in that sense, knowing that you need to be harbored when you're going through a hard time, important information. Go and get that harboring. Knowing that you need awe and inspiration, go to the top of something. It's important. When you can speak this language, you know what you need.
That's right.
And you can find it in another person, in a landscape, in nature, in a city. It's there for you.
And it's the awareness of that, of the awareness that, I'm feeling this way, so this is what I need.
That's right.
It might be a cup of coffee, in a really comfortable chair, something really simple.
And this is really a life's journey, right, that we're all taking. And really all I'm trying to do is explain the sort of route that you take, and everyone's is different, their journey's different, but going from the sea to the sky and back again through all these different stages that we go through is part of something that's both universal and very, very particular at the same time.
Yes, and it's a map of the heart in many ways.
That's right.
Yeah, it's interesting. Julie, you've had a pretty long career now.
I have.
45,
maybe 50
yeah, 40
years.
I like to say 40 some odd years, right?
That's all right. I don't mind.
And now that you are on,
I'm up on the mountain.
You're up on the mountain, and when you were talking about that, I was saying, yes, what this offers us, being at this age, is perspective.
It does.
It's
it
a
totally
completely
does.
different kind of perspective,
Yep.
which in the olden days we would have climbed that mountain, right? But now that we're actually sort of there in a more whole kind of way, and able to look down and see the different angles, and to look back as well to where we've been.
Yeah.
Can you say anything about that?
Well, I just think that what we are, we have personalities, and some of us automatically gravitate toward a perspective, a broad perspective in the world. And some of us are really much more focused people who are very good at detail and really good at handling what's right in the here and now in front of you.
Yeah.
And what's important is that you be able to do all of those things. And I've had lately, with putting an app out and having to do all the work around that's not natural for me.
Yeah.
What's natural is sort of concept and big ideas. I've had to focus really hard to raise money, to work with all sorts of different people to make this happen. And that focus has been good for me. So being able to have a little piece of the whole journey and come back around on it every day, really.
Yeah.
And then finally go back to sleep, back to the sea, and start a new day the next morning and get out of bed and off you go again. So you do it every day, you do it every week, you do it through your life.
Yeah.
You fall back when you're going through some kind of a hardship, and then you make your way back out again. And it's very nice to know that life is sort of consistent and yet changing all the time. And it's constant and has changed.
And offering so much.
And
all
offering
the time.
so much, yes.
Julie, thank you so much.
What a treat to talk to you. It's been really fun.
It was really fun, really delightful. Thank you.
Good.
Thanks to all of you for joining us today with Julie Moir Messervy and all she has to offer to the world and to all of us gardeners and non-gardeners alike, giving us a perspective on all of that. At the end of the show, there are the credits, and there will be, you can get on her websites. There are 2 different websites. And also check them out. She's got a lot of great information there. The apps are really exciting, especially for people who are looking for a new way of looking at gardening and designing in their own backyards. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.